to have married, for under the soft, loving, pliable girl there lay hidden, as much unknown to herself as to her surroundings, a woman of strong, dominant will, strength that panted for expression and rebelled against restraint, fiery and passionate emotions that were seething under compression, a most undesirable partner to sit in the lady's armchair on the domestic rug before the fire. Que le diable faisait elle dans cette galère? I have often thought, looking back at my past self, and asking, why did that foolish girl make her bed so foolishly? But self-analysis shows the contradictories in my nature that led me into so mistaken a course. I have ever been the queerest mixture of weakness and strength, and have paid heavily for the weakness. As a child I used to suffer tortures of shyness, and if my shoelace was untied, would feel shamefacedly that every eye was fixed on the unlucky string. As a girl I would shrink away from strangers and think myself unwanted and unliked, so that I was full of eager gratitude to anyone who noticed me kindly. As the young mistress of a house I was afraid of my servants, and so would let careless work pass rather than bear the pain of reproving the ill doer. When I have been lecturing and debating with no lack of spirit on the platform, I have preferred to go without what I wanted at the hotel rather than to ring and make the waiter fetch it. Combative on the platform in defence of any cause I cared for, I shrink from quarrel or disapproval in the home, and am a coward at heart in private, while a good fighter in public. How often have I passed unhappy quarters of an hour screwing up my courage to find fault with some subordinate whom my duty compelled me to reprove, and how often have I jeered at myself for a fraud as the doughty platform combatant when shrinking from blaming some lad or lass for doing their work badly. An unkind look or word has availed to make me shrink into myself as a snail into its shell, while on the platform opposition makes me speak my best. So I slid into marriage blindly and stupidly, fearing to give pain, fretted my heart out for a year, then, roused by harshness and injustice, stiffened and hardened, and lived with a wall of ice round me within which I waged mental conflicts that nearly killed me, and learned at last how to live and work in armour that turned the edge of the weapons that struck it, and left the flesh beneath unwounded, armour laid aside, but in the presence of a very few. My first serious attempts at writing were made in 1868, and I took up two very different lines of composition. I wrote some short stories of a very flimsy type, and also a work of a much more ambitious character, The Lives of the Black Letter Saints. For the sake of the unecclesiastically trained, it may be as well to mention that in the calendar of the Church of England there are a number of saints' days. Some of these are printed in red, and are red letter days, for which the services are appointed by the Church. Others are printed in black, and are black letter days, and have no special services fixed for them. It seemed to me that it would be interesting to take each of these days and write a sketch of the life of the saint belonging to it, and accordingly I set to work to do so, and gathered various books of history and legend wherefrom to collect my facts. I do not know in the least what became of that valuable book. I tried Macmillan's with it, and it was sent on by them to someone who was preparing a series of church books for the young. Later I had a letter from a church brotherhood offering to publish it, if I would give it as an act of piety to their order. Its ultimate fate is to me unknown. The short stories were more fortunate. I sent the first to the Family Herald, and some weeks afterward received a letter from which dropped a cheque as I opened it. Dear me! I have earned a good deal of money since by my pen, but never any that gave me the intense delight of that first 30 shillings. It was the first money I had ever earned, and the pride of the earning was added to the pride of authorship. In my childish delight and practical religion, I went down on my knees and thanked God for sending it to me, and I saw myself earning heaps of golden guineas and becoming quite a support of the household. Besides, it was my very own, I thought, and a delightful sense of independence came over me. I had not then realised the beauty of the English law and the dignified position in which it placed the married woman. I did not understand that all a married woman earned by law belonged to her owner, and that she could have nothing that belonged to her of right. I did not want the money, I was so glad to have something of my own to give, and it was rather a shock to learn that it was not really mine at all. From time to time after that I earned a few pounds for stories in the same journal, and the Family Herald, to let me say, has one peculiarity which it should render it beloved by poor authors. It pays its contributor when it accepts the paper, whether it prints it immediately or not. Thus my first story was not printed for some weeks after I received the cheque, and it was the same with all the others accepted by the same journal. Encouraged by these small successes, I began writing a novel. It took a long time to do, but was at last finished, and sent off to the Family Herald. The poor thing came back, but with a kind note, telling me that it was too political for their pages, but that if I would write one of purely domestic interest, and up to the same level, it would probably be accepted. But by that time I was in the full struggle of theological doubt, and that novel of purely domestic interest never got itself written. I contributed further to the literature of my country a theological pamphlet, of which I forget the exact title, but it dealt with the duty of fasting incumbent on all faithful Christians, and was very patristic in its tone. In January, 1869, my little son was born, and as I was very ill for some months before, and was far too much interested in the tiny creature afterward, to devote myself to pen and paper, my literary career was checked for a while. The baby gave a new interest and a new pleasure to life, and as we could not afford a nurse, I had plenty to do in looking after his small majesty. My energy in reading became less feverish when it was done by the side of the baby's cradle, and the little one's presence almost healed the abiding pain of my mother's loss. End of chapter 4, part 1.